So where are we going, Rob?
We're going up to the starting grid.
So, welcome. The back of the race shop is basically where we keep the tyres and all the spares. So, throughout a race weekend, we have an option of 3 different rear slicks. So, we have to have a big bundle of tyres at the start because we go through the options and see which tyre is working the best. We have 2 different fronts to choose from, and obviously we need wets. Right now, you're looking at the end of the race meeting. Before, that pile was a lot higher, and we go through a lot of tyres, but the tyres themselves are a big job. We have one guy that's permanently on tyres, so he keeps track of how many tyres we have. You can see this tyre rack here. We have tyres on the racks, and we have these tyre warmers. We have there's 2 of these boxes just full of tyre warmers because we have to have them on the warmers, and the warmers are actually heat controlled. We try to keep them between 80 and 100 degrees. So it's a full-time job just looking after the tyres to make sure that they're hot and they're ready to go. And we have a run plan. So for each session, we actually plan out, we'll start on SCX, or we'll start out on SC1, or start out on SCA. And then we'll move to each tyre to try and figure out what tyre is going to give us the best grip. And sometimes the best grip isn't always the best option because it wears out really quick. So we're trying to set the bike up the best we can for a qualifying run and then for a 13-lap race run. Over here, we have a suspension area. So basically, we have a few different tools here that we use for measuring up suspension. So what we have here is one of our shock absorbers that is a spare shock absorber. We use by Turbo race suspension. But this tool here is basically the shock absorber itself. We want to know how long it is because it controls the ride height of the bike. So basically, we use this tool here for measuring how long the shock is, and then when there's a spring on the shock itself, we can measure how much preload's on the spring at the same time. So I don't know if you've seen this before, but most of the shocks come with a top-out spring now. And what happens is you think the shock length is, at the moment, it says 360, but the top-out spring's quite long. So this tool allows us to stretch the top-out spring until it's locked out. Because when I grab the brakes on the bike will top out. We want to know that length is. So now you can see that's stretched it all the way out to 368. So it's like 8 mil difference. And you want to know what that difference is because when you put different springs on there, it stretches it out to different lengths. So that's a really important tool for us. And we call it the shock stretcher. So very handy tool for understanding where we are with the setup of the shock absorbers. And then there's a shock spring compressor, obviously you got to compress the shock to get the spring off. It's quite a dangerous job to do, but when you got the right equipment, it's not so bad. So that's what that tool's for. And then we have a lot of spares in case we crash. So we've got a lot of crash spares. So just shock bolts, and we have it all itemized. These are engine mount bolts with the expanders and exhaust springs and spare handlebars because they usually are the first thing to break when you crash, spare handlebars, and an all assortment of nuts and bolts that we use all sort of put in the right place. So when the boys know that I've broken something or missing something, we can come in and grab it, get it on the bike straight away. That's all clutch parts. So a big part of the bike is the clutch. The clutch setting is really important to how the bike handles. So we've got a couple of spare clutches there ready to go. And these are this foot pegs ready to go. Already, basically, the foot pegs are quite tricky, and there's a lot of little bits of parts to them. So we sort of put them together so that they're ready to go straight onto the bike. So they're ready to go there. And then, we've got lots of other little special tools for working on the suspension. So whenever we're doing a suspension change, we got all these special clamps that hold the fork internals, and there's quite a lot to it. Just prepping the suspension is a full-time job in itself, So lots of tooling that we take to the track. These tools here are for special ride height tools for the bike. I'll show you how they work. So this tool goes into the bike because we're always trying to keep the bike at a correct ride height to keep the balance of the bike right, so the front and rear weight distribution of the bike is always correct. So Alpha make this really cool tool. Can I just get in there, Scotty, for a sec? So if you look over here, you're probably best to come around here. This tool's already designed by Alpha to fit into the BMW, so it just clamps in here through the engine mount and the swing arm pivot. And then this tool here, we basically measure to the rear axle, and this here gives us an exact guide of where the back swing arm of the bike is. We're always adjusting the bike to try and generate grip so we can move the pivot, but you don't want to move the pivot and then have the ride height be completely off because you'll change the angle of the forks. So we always want the forks in the same position. And then, so that's a really handy tool because we make so many changes to the shock absorber throughout the weekend. This tool gets us to be able to make the changes and then make an adjustment so that our ride height's in the exact same position, and then it won't affect the way that the front end of the bike works. It'll just make a change directly to the shock, and it doesn't affect the balance of the bike in any other way. At the moment, we're having a problem. Dash won't talk to us, but we have a spare dash, a spare Motec dash. We're probably going to put the dash into the bike for the second race because it won't talk to us. So we want to look at the data that just came out of the bike from race one. And the technicians usually will pull the data from the bike, and then there's a lot of squiggly lines, but when you know what you're looking at, you can see how much suspension travel you have in the rear, how much wheel spin you have, fork position, brake pressure. All of that is logged in the bike through the Motec dash. Throughout the race, I've actually got a lot of buttons here that I can push throughout the race to try and generate grip, or if I want the engine to give me a different level of power. And so during the race, I usually use this button here. It's plus and minus. So if I want more engine brake, so I run into the corner faster, I push minus, so the bike will be freer into the corner. So during that race just then, the engine brake was too free. So I was pushing on this plus button like 3 or 4 pushes every single time, because every time I was trying to grab the brakes, the engine was pushing me all the time because the rear wheel was really slippery because the grip was going away. Yeah. The more that the rear slipped, the more the engine brake mat was opening the throttle when I grabbed the brakes because it could sense the slip. So I can actually control that with these switches here. I can change the mode, so I can change how much traction control I have, but I usually only just leave it on engine brake mode because that's what always changes throughout a race run. We usually have 2 bikes here. The wet bike's out the back, but we'll have another bike sitting there with wet tyres on it, softer suspension, or same ride height, same bar position. So we use that tool that I just showed you on the other bike so that everything feels the same, but we just run the bike softer. And if it rains, which it is right now, we've always got that option to jump to that wet bike. The boys just go to work straight away. So most of our parts on this bike are really quickly, you can quickly replace them. It's like the handlebars can come straight off. If we just have a crash and we bend this handlebar, this whole assembly here, we've got one in the box back there ready to go. And you just undo this bolt here and that will slip off and we can put a whole assembly straight back on. So it's about speed and trying to get the bike back together as quick as we can. And then if you look around the bike, most of the fittings to the fairings are Zeus fasteners. Zeus fasteners are these little twist locks, and they come off really quickly. So we can put a whole new set of fairings, which we have already, stick it up on the bike really quickly. As long as the mounts aren't damaged, we can get a new set of fairings on real quick. Like I said, we have the rear set's assembled, ready to go, so that these 2 bolts are pretty much, and where the master cylinder hook's on is all we have to do. We just bang them straight on there and then we can get the bike going really quickly. There's a couple of checks that we'll do to make sure the bike's not bent, because that's the most important thing. You don't want to ride on a bent bike, but worst case scenario, we can convert the spare bike into a dry bike pretty quickly with the suspension to make it stiffer. Go through a lot of different changes with the gearing. We're always changing the gearing with sprockets because different racetracks, different radius corners, you need different gearing. So for instance, the gear ratio that we ran at Phillip Island was 16:44, and the gear ratio we run here, because there's tighter corners, it's 15 on the front and 43 on the back. So it's actually a shorter ratio. So my top speed's lower here because the bike revs out quicker than at Phillip Island. Top speed at Phillip Island was like 319. I think my top speed here is about 299. So we're always changing that, and that's when that ride height tool also comes in handy, because when you move the wheel back and forth, when you change the gearing, it also changes the position of the axle, so you still want to have that ride height position correct. With our ECU, it's broken up into sectors. So our actual bike has sectoring. So you have to fill it out. For every time I open the throttle, it's called an acceleration sector. And every time I close the throttle, it's called a deceleration sector. And so on the mapping that Scott has back there, you'll have to fill out each zone for how much power I want and how much engine brake I want. But the beauty of that is, I was complaining about the engine brake in turn 2. When we pull the data out and look at it, we can make an adjustment to turn 2 and it won't affect the bike in any other corner. So we can do sectoring. It's all distance based. We have GPS on the bike, but we're not allowed to use the GPS to tell the bike what mode to put itself into. It's just a rule that they have in ASBK. So the bike measures how far it's gone before it goes into the next sector. So it's quite complicated. You need somebody to work on the electronics as much as you need someone to ride the bike. Like it's a full-time job. They didn't want sectoring up until recently, and now we're using sectoring. And the system's pretty basic with the way it measures it. You have to tell it a measurement of how far the distance is between corners, and then so it can constantly monitor. This is an example. If I come out of turn 1, usually I just hold the gas all the way to turn 2, so it knows I'm in acceleration zone 2. If I close the throttle because I have to swerve for something and then open it again, it still reads the distance, so it doesn't go, oh, he's closed the throttle, now he's in acceleration zone 2, so it still reads the distance to back it up. The beauty of that is you can adjust the engine brake in second gear for turn 2, but I'm in second gear in 2 other parts of the track. So I'm in second gear up at turn 6 and second gear at turn 9. Now, if it was just global where you adjust, it would affect all parts of the track. The way that this system works, it will just affect one part of the track.
Do you want to walk us through race 1?
Yeah, okay. I got a really good start. I mean, that was my goal. I actually wanted to lead, but I didn't get that good of a start. And I was happy with how the bike felt, and I was rolling with the leaders. I actually thought to myself, we're going to go good here. And then in just a couple of times trying to get on the throttle through turn 5 and then up over Corporate Hill, I had a couple of big front end moments. And then it just started, the rear tyre, like just the setting that we have at the moment with the engine brake and with how much power I've got, because the lap times are fast, so I'm asking for more and more power. I want to go faster. The problem is my mid-corner speed's probably a little bit low at the moment because we missed out on some testing. So I'm trying to make up the time by going like that and then grabbing the brake really hard where they're really fast in the middle of the corner. So by lap 3, I'd used up the best part of the tyre, and then I started sliding a lot. And then once I started sliding a lot, they just pulled away. And then for me, it was just about trying to get on the podium and hold the guys back. But yeah, the Yamaha guy, I sort of made a big mistake and he got away from me. But once I was with the guy on the Honda, we were sort of matching each other, and then the race got red flagged. But yeah, I was kind of, honestly, halfway through the race, I wanted it to rain. There was a few spits and I was like, rain.
That's my next question. What do you like in the wet?
Yeah, I like it. So I actually, if it's wet, we're going to be on for a good race. If it's patchy, halfway in between, and we can run slicks, then that would be the ultimate for me, because I'm confident in those conditions to run the slick tyres on a patchy track. If we get to that point tonight, I'm going to be excited about that. It's still hard work. It's not easy, but it gives us a chance. I think our bike's really good in those conditions. The bike's really good when the track's a bit patchy. I think the bike seems to be able to keep the heat in the tyres and generate that. The way that the bike wears the tyre, it actually helps keep heat in the tyre when you're going a bit slower. So I think that's an advantage for us. Like, I spend a lot of my time in the race transporter. Yeah, come on in, guys. It's all right.
So, Anthony, you don't sleep in here, do you?
We can. There's a bed up there, but I don't sleep because I don't drive the truck. But the old owner, Shane, he used to sleep in here like we race in Darwin, for instance. So that's a 4-day drive for him he was in Victoria. So yeah, like he would sleep in it and then keep driving. We've got a kitchenette. A lot of those parts that I was telling you about that are ready to go are in those boxes. So they're full of fairings. So the fairings already stick it up with the numbers and everything on them, and they're in like foam sort of pouches. So we can just pull them straight out of there, and they're already been fitted up to the bike, so they're ready to go. So literally we can get the bike going in 20 minutes, you know. There's a little kitchenette there that we usually have our food in, and there's a shower there that's never been used. So that's going to be coming out at some point. So and we have like a little suspension bay, but that's a bit of a mess at the moment because I set it up in the inside the actual pit box itself, because some of the pits that we go to, we don't have the room. When we race with the V8s, we get a little tent, which is the size of that annex out the back. And so we'll set it up in here, and this has a gas bottle here ready to go, so we can repressurize the shocks because they're pressurized shocks with nitrogen gas. We've got lots of basically this is just a rider's area, so the bikes actually fit in here. You can see where the bikes fit in, and then we convert it. So I have all my helmet dryers and my spare helmets and spare visors and everything ready to go here. So I'm always just got a little area to prep my helmets, because that's the most important thing for the weekend, is have your helmets prepped properly so you can see properly, you can hear properly, and yeah, to me your helmet's your most important thing that you can have, because it protects you.
So they're helmet dryers.
Yeah, so if you come up and have a look, I've just converted these little DeWalt fans into, I just have it so it sits my helmet on, and then I made this little frame so I can sit my gloves in there, and then it's like a Bunnings version of a helmet dryer, but it works really good. And then, like I said before, you can see in the corner there, we've got spare forks that are already ready to go. So they're marked and labelled with what spring they have, what damping setting they have, and what oil height they have. They're ready to go. Like my nephew shares this area with me, so he's just started racing as well. So he gets ready in here as well. Always have my leathers sort of just hanging up, airing out. And then we also have a spare engine behind you. So we've got two spare engines. At the moment, we've got one that's apart. We do some stuff to the engines where we just make sure that all the clearances are correct in the bearings in the crankshaft, and so that the bearing shells are the right distance. So that's apart at the moment. This is our spare engine on that little cradle. Actually makes it really handy to, like, we can just strap it in or we can move it around. But if we have a problem with the engine in one of the bikes, we can get the engine out of the bikes, and that engine's already been run before on a dyno, and we know how much power it makes. It's probably we call it Old Smoky because it blows smoke, but it makes good power, and it's still here, so we take it with us, because obviously it's an expensive item to have as a spare, and to have two of them is a luxury, really. Like, we're really lucky to be able to afford to have that stuff. This is my nephew, Josh.
Hey, Josh.
He's just started, or not just started, but he's just started racing in the 300 Supersport class, and he races those little ovales as well, so he's doing quite well. You got fourth at the last Ovale race, didn't you?
Good job.
Yeah.
Awesome.
And finished ninth in that race just then in the 300 Supersport race.
15. Wow.
So I'm trying to put as much of my knowledge and things that I've learned over the 30 years that I've been racing into him. So he comes training with me, and we do little boot camp style training, and he's getting better and better all the time. Like, he comes cycling with me, and they can see a lot of stuff on the data, but it's always guided by me. So I'll get off the bike and I'll go, oh, the front's not right. I'm like, the first problem I had this weekend was that I was getting front chatter.
Yeah.
So that means I was braking into the corner and I was getting lean angle. And as soon as I wanted to release the brakes, the front would start to get a lot of vibration in it. So it means it's like on the edge of grip, it starts to chatter.
Which means obviously they jump into action.
Yeah, and their focus, so I'm just a guide to where their focus will be in that data. So their focus will go on the front fork setting, and then what is the engine brake map doing, because that affects the front fork. How far is the stroke of the fork going in? Does the fork look like it's diving, or does the fork look like it's not diving fast enough? If it's too hard, they can see by the angle of the dive. And a lot of that's experience of what you're looking at.
That's a great explanation. So you'd say, you obviously can pinpoint it, but they can then unravel it. I mean, they can actually decipher it.
Yeah.
And I guess this is where you're going to get the benefit of having mentorship. You know what I mean?
100%.
You don't know it at the moment, but it's happening every day.
Yeah, and he picks up. He's like a sponge. He's always listening to what I'm saying after sessions and picking up and understanding the language. But All I can say is I wish I had an uncle like me when I was 15.
Awesome.
Because I would have shortcutted a lot of pain. Yeah, that's for sure. I feel like I'm lucky. When I come through the sport and I started where he was, it was a cheap sport. Not cheap, but cheaper sport, and it's become very expensive.
More, what was affordable, maybe.
Yeah, and to get to where I got to, I did it with the help of my father, and I worked as well full-time as soon as I left school. But I could go racing, and now to that level, you need sponsorship, and you need people. You need, like, basically what I have is just a group of people that believe in me and what I can do on the bike, and we go and we have fun while we're doing it. So we're all like a family going together, going racing. But that's the same on any level of racing, you know.
Well, I think that's what builds a team, doesn't it? You know? So without that team, they're going to not really go.
So I'm trying to teach him about looking after his sponsors. So we've managed to get him some really good sponsors this year, and it's not just about what you can get out of them; it's about what you can give back, so that they have a really good experience, and then they'll want to help you even more. And then even later on down the track, if you move on to a team, 5 years down the track, that person might end up helping you down the track. You know, it's about just building a good relationship.
Right, they might be a great racer, but they've got to be the whole package.
That's right. You got to look after the business side of racing is real, and you have to pay attention to it and put effort into it.
You have to be humble.
Yes.
As well.
Yep.
And have a cool uncle.
Yeah. I don't think he thinks I'm that cool.
No, I think he does.
So we're at the Australian Superbike Championships. We're walking up to start the grid. Tristan's here. So Quanti's up in the stand somewhere, and we're going to check out the grid. Pretty cool.
Just watching it over.
I'm just calling you in.
Fly all the way around, or?
That's pretty much the way. How's the track?
Good luck, mate.
Good luck.
Here we go. Race number 2 of round number 2 of the My Bike Motorcycle Insurance for 2023 here at Eastern Creek under lights. History of the making for Superbike to lights out.